Good morning. We're continuing with our theme that we left off with yesterday, and actually this graphic works really well. You'll see that phrase come up a number of times this morning as we consider the substitute for criminals. Yesterday our emphasis was on the criminals, and we asked the question, well, what kind of a person would be sentenced to die such a death? What would they have had to have done? And to put it in a nutshell, I think you could say a traitor. A traitor is the kind of person that deserved to die. And maybe this graphic will help us as we consider this concept of a substitute for us. A traitor is someone who's on the inside and they switch sides. They choose to go with the people on the outside. They turn their back on the ones they were among. That's a traitor. Our question for us this morning is, well, what kind of a person would willingly be a substitute to die such a death for a traitor? Our song for this morning, I think, is best sung at the beginning. It's going to be 4 stanzas of a hymn, and everyone should join in right away. Thank you.
Christ
So let's consider this idea of a substitute. I'm going to throw a couple of other related concepts out there with you because I'm not convinced in my own head that I like the concept of a substitute the best necessarily. We sang it a number of times in the refrain there, what Christ did for us. Another way to put that would be at the bottom there, in the place of. So all three of these ideas reflect that idea of someone in the place of someone else. Let's take a substitute. We're all familiar with substitutes and substitutions. Maybe, perhaps, here in a school setting, a substitute teacher comes to mind. On the sports field, you might think of a substitute who comes in to play. And maybe if you're a cook, you think of a substitution for an ingredient that you don't have. What I don't like about the idea of a substitute is I feel like it almost has a negative connotation. Like the substitute is, it's not quite up to what the level is of the thing that it's replacing. You know, honestly, do you have the same approach towards a substitute teacher in your classroom as you do towards the teacher, him or herself? When you look at a sports team, do you look at the first team? Do you look at the starters? And do you consider the first person off the bench or the seventh or the eighth or wherever they are coming on to play, do you consider them at the same level as the starters, as the first team? Or is the substitute maybe not quite up to par? Same for cooking. The substitution that I typically have to make is for buttermilk. If I don't have buttermilk in the fridge, I got to pull out some milk and add a little lemon juice and make my own, and I don't know if it's quite as good or not. But regardless, we understand that a substitute is someone that's serving in the place of someone else. I like to think of a stunt double. A stunt double is a person who stands in for an actor. Well, what's the point of having a stunt double come in and do the work of an actor? Well, the actor has a tremendous amount of value. They're the ones that get paid the big bucks, and they don't want that person to get hurt. So the stunt double, taps him on the shoulder. They call cut. They switch him out. Actor steps out. Stunt double stands in and does the dangerous thing on behalf of the actor. I kind of like that idea because it involves sort of a physical element to it. But a stunt double or a stand-in serves in the place of another. And lastly, a sacrifice. In our setting, the thoughts that come to mind for me for sacrifice would probably be a sacrifice of time or a sacrifice of effort or energy, maybe a sacrifice of money. Some of you do a lot of training in the weight room. You give up time to train in the off season, perhaps, so that you can excel when your sport season rolls around. If you play games, there's a variety of games. Chess comes to mind, where maybe you see something has greater value, and so you're willing to sacrifice, say, a pawn or a rook or something like that for a piece or a position that you feel is greater. Regardless, a sacrifice is something that's given up in the place of or for something else that's thought to have had probably greater value. Jesus himself described himself as a sacrifice. He said in John chapter 10, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I lay down my life. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. That word that is translated for the sheep there literally means in the place of. And what a beautiful reminder this is. Jesus shares with us before all these circumstances that we're pondering this week. He understood the path that lay before him, and he was willing to, as he put it, lay down his life in the place of the life of or lives of the sheep. He put it this way, or he didn't put it this way, he put it this way through Paul, you might say. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Christ died in the place of us. He was a willing substitute, a willing stand-in, a willing sacrifice for you and for me. As we go through this story, it might be tempting to think, well, what a quaint story. That's a lot of suffering that Jesus went through, and man, some people really treated him poorly. If we turn to Luke chapter 23, we're introduced to this character of Barabbas. And the name Barabbas is kind of curious because it means Bar, son, Abbas, or Abba, the father. Son of the father had been thrown into prison for insurrection. We touched on this yesterday, and for murder. Insurrection is that act of reaching out, grabbing for authority that's not yours. That's what Barabbas was guilty of. Barabbas was guilty of taking life as a murderer. And so he rightly is put on trial. We might think, well, if it wasn't for Barabbas, Jesus would never be in this predicament. Or if it wasn't for this guy Judas, Jesus would never be in this predicament. In Luke 22, we read about Judas. Then Judas went to the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard, and he discussed with them how he might betray Jesus. And they were delighted and agreed to give him money. If it wasn't for Judas, Jesus wouldn't be in this predicament of needing to be a substitute. Or we might say, well, if it wasn't for Peter and the disciples. In Luke chapter 22, we read, Jesus predicted, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you'll deny me 3 times. You flip the page, and we read that after the disciples had fled, Peter followed Jesus, but it says at a distance. And when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. And the servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, this man was with them. But he denied it. Woman, I don't know him. And he denied it. I don't know what you're talking about. And he denied it. And the rooster crowed. If it wasn't for Peter, Jesus would never have been in this situation. Or how about that guy Pilate? If it wasn't for Pilate, Jesus wouldn't have to be in this predicament. Look what Pilate did. Pilate released Barabbas, the one guilty of insurrection, the one who had murdered, taken life. He released Barabbas, who'd been thrown into prison, and what does he do? He releases the one that the crowd asked for. He surrendered Jesus to their will, it says. If it wasn't for Pilate, this never would have had to happen. This horrible suffering that Jesus went through, and death. But the ugly truth is, if it wasn't for me, Jesus would not have been in that situation. How often haven't I surrendered Jesus to my will and my wants and my desires? How often haven't I been like Peter and out denied a relationship with Jesus? Or maybe I consider myself a follower of Jesus, but I keep my distance. I don't want to be seen as being too closely connected to Jesus. Or how often haven't I been like Judas, pursuing other things that I see as greater value as this Jesus? In his case, he's looking for dollars. Do we do that? Look for time, look for money, look for possessions? Sadly, I think it's true. How often aren't we like Barabbas, seeking authority, position that's not meant to be had at this time or this place? How often don't we value my own life, my own well-being, over that of those around me? The ugly truth is, it's because of me, it's because of you, each one of us, that Jesus had to step in, to stand in, to be our substitute, a sacrifice on our behalf. This is the truth. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each one of us has turned to our own ways. And he took up our pain. He bore our suffering. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. On him was the punishment that brought us peace. By his wounds, we're healed. On him was the iniquity of all of us, and he was led like a lamb to the slaughter. We pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Amen. Are there any announcements?